Good afternoon again. So this is Shan Bao. So today I will talk about our study related to cyclist safety. So basically, here's my title, Cycling Safety from Data to the Truth. So you would understand our research is a data-driven, used a data-driven methodology. So here's the content of my presentation today. I will give you some background, then some literature review findings, then methodology overview, then I will talk about the results, conclusions, then future plans, of course, acknowledgement. So if you have questions, just like Henry mentioned, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A and we're going to address it in the end. So here's the background. Why we care about cycling safety, right? Well, first of all, cycling provides us with a lot of benefits. For example, you can commute with a bike to work, like Professor Feng. So he probably will introduce that he's actually a professional biker. He can bike like from Ann Arbor to Detroit to work to Dearborn. So this is, especially with the pandemic years, this has becoming a more and more popular commute choices for a lot of people. Of course, biking can give us a workout. So it helps with our health conditions and it can relieve our stress conditions, right? Especially for me, I typically when I feel stressed, I probably will go running and sometimes biking. And of course, the social distancing is pretty important during the pandemic period. And also it's pretty healthy to the environment. So the safety concerns. So basically, there is statistics has shown there is a significant increase of the past 2 years of bicycle uses on the U.S. roads between 2019 and 2020. So basically, last year, due to the pandemic impact, so there is actually almost 30% of increase of bike use on our public roads in the U.S. So there is also one interesting findings that if you can see the two bottom figures, that the right corner figure shows the number of bicyclist injury levels across several years, different years from 2009 to 2018. You can see basically there is a trending of decreasing of number of bicyclists involving injuries. However, in terms of fatalities, so there is increasing trend that actually in 2018, the number of fatalities is much larger than the ones in 2017. So there is something going on there. So we want to understand what are the factors causing to the crashes, especially causing to the different injury severity consequences. So this page, we summarized from the literature review, basically basically a comprehensive list of the factors that affecting bicyclist injury levels. So that goes from environmental related factors, for example, weather condition, lighting conditions. So you would understand, right? Basically, when you bike during the dark without lighting conditions, there will be relatively more risk of getting crashes and more severe injuries. And also there are a bunch of roadway related factors, for example, alignment and profile, traffic control devices, speed limit settings, geometry of the road features. And also there is a temporal factors. For example, weekend days, weekdays will be different. And the time of a day would also have an impact on the injury severity and crash consequences. And bicyclist factors like age and gender, their traveling speed, and their helmet use, and there is accident-related factors. For example, vehicle type, the SUVs and the light trucks will basically generally result in more severe injury levels involving bicyclists when compared to sedan. There's biking directions is whether the vehicle is traveling the same direction as the bike or the opposing directions. And also there is a driver related factors. For example, the driver age and gender, traveling speed, and intoxication conditions. So with all those conditions, factors impacting on our cycling safety and injury consequences. So here I want to show you some real world cycling video examples. So the data was from the Tree safety pilot study data. So this data was captured actually by the onboard sensors in the vehicle that capture the cyclist on the roadway. So so here's the example show you all different several different scenarios and conditions involving pretty challenging driving condition as well as a cycling condition. So the first case, can you guys see the video?
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome. So so basically I will replay this. I just want to give you some background. So basically in the safety pilot data, we have each of the vehicle was instrumented with a bunch of sensors and DAS. So this was captured by the different camera views that capture the driver view and the front view. So that's, you can see the bicyclist basically is in front of the car, and those are the rear views from left and right. So the bounding box, the green bounding box, just show you the cyclist. So this condition is basically the both of the driver and the cyclist were traveling to the same direction. However, the bicyclist lane was blocked by a road construction. So there is unexpected direction change from the bicyclist. I'm gonna replay it. As you can see, by this, at this location, the bicyclist lane was ended by the road construction. So then there is unexpected, probably from the driver's side, that the bicyclist needs to change its lane to share the road with the driver. So this is a second video I want to share with you. Is basically so basically, when the driver sharing the road with the pedestrians and cyclists, sometimes it's not just a single pedestrian or single cyclist. So a lot of the time they have to share the roads with a group of cyclists, a group of pedestrians. So that also added to the complications to the situation. So this is a perfect example of like some ADAS functions. So what I meant here is basically at the beginning, so I'm gonna stop here. At the beginning, our eco vehicle was following a lead vehicle. So you can see right there. So then basically the bicyclist was riding in front of the lead vehicle. It was blocked, the view, the bicyclist, the view was blocked by the lead vehicle. So typically, for this situation, for the typical ACC systems, so it's a radar-based or camera-based, so they will have a hard time to detect small objects in a very short period of time, just like a case of such scenario. For example, when so these lead vehicle just made a sudden lane change to the other lane while the host vehicle needs to interact with the bicyclist directly, but eventually the eco vehicle driver managed to change its lane. So this is the fourth example I will show is also just environmental conditions, weather conditions. So you can see this is a winter season, and interestingly, we still have the capture a lot of cases that our riders are still riding on the wet roads. So this is when you can see the slow on the roadside. So basically, just give you some examples of in the real world. there are a lot of complicated scenarios that the driver needs to face, as well as a bicyclist need to face. So at the University of Michigan, we have conducted a series of studies using different scientific methodologies to investigate bicyclist safety. For example, crash data analysis, naturalistic bike study, and a naturalistic driving study, like the safety pilot study that we have utilized the data from the safety pilot study and use that for a lot of studies. And also at the University of Michigan, we're also doing a lot of studies using the simulation and virtual reality techniques. So by using all those scientific methodologies, we are able to basically identify crash patterns and the contributing factors to the crash, different type of crashes and different type of safety consequences in injury levels. And we are also able to basically to identify the issues that the interactions and between the vehicles and the cyclists and the challenging scenarios, as well as to identify potential technology solutions. For example, the small object detection, we can basically utilize redundant sensors if one of the sensors cannot detect a cyclist within a short period of time. So basically today, I want to introduce our crash data analysis study is with the title of Identify Factors Related to Crash Injury Levels Involving Bicyclists, a crash data analysis. So basically, the lead author is Daniel. I'm one of my great PhD students, and also one of the collaborators, Dr. Aditi Misra from Tree. So we have this paper accepted by the 2022 Transportation Research Board annual meeting, yay! And Daniel is going to present this with more details. So today I was just going to provide you with some summaries and a briefing on the methodologies that we used. So the objective of this study is basically to present a systematic analysis using the United States crash data to identify first the predictors that are significantly contributing to the resultant level of injury of a bicyclist when involved in a crash with a motorist. And the second objective is basically to compare different model performance and results. So the methods, the data we use is from the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Crash Report Sampling System data. It's also called a CRSS. So we use the 3 years of data that from 2016 to 2018, that a total of about 4,596 crash data points that we have used. So the modeling techniques we use is basically the standard multinomial Nugget regression models. Not very fancy, but it's pretty robust to handle data like this. And the dependent variables is basically the outcome of the bicyclist injury severity level for each of the crash cases. So for the independent variables, we use a set of 37 variables. So that include temporal, for example, time of a day, a year, quarter, or day types, is a weekdays or weekends. Also, we have the environmental variables, including lighting condition, weather condition, roadway surface condition, and the roadway. So basically it's a type of intersection or location with intersection, etc. We also have vehicle related variables included, for example, body type, whether it's an SUV or sedan, or it's a truck. Also the traveling speed of the vehicle and the maneuver, whether the vehicle is going straight or making turns. And we have the driver related wearables included that basically have age, gender of the driver, whether the driver consumed alcohol or drug, whether there is a speeding condition, and number of passengers in the vehicle as well. So the bicyclist related wearables we had also includes the similar wearables that listed here. So there is other wearable, for example, whether which party at fault, whether the driver at fault or the bicyclist at fault, as well as the event making crash imminent. So in the pie chart, we basically presented the distribution of the crash injury severity levels. So we have about 41% of possible injuries and about 48% of moderate and about 12% of severe injuries. So then for the purposes of the modeling, we basically just created of two levels of severity and moderate. So then the methodologies we use is basically we use the NHTSA CRSS data, the past 3 years of CRSS data. Then we select all the above mentioned wearables where we did all the table joint merge and did the data segregation. And basically we had 3 data sets. Then we ran 3 different legit regression models. So one on the crashes that occurred in the travel lanes, and the other data, which is also a model we basically did using all the crash data involving bicyclists that occurred at non-travel lane locations. And then the third model we used, basically we combine all the first 2 data sets. We ran the logistical regression model. Basically, we want to compare which model will provide a better which methodology will provide a better prediction results. It's a separate model, or we can do a generic full model. So then for each, as I mentioned, for each of the data sets, we ran a multinomial logistic regression model. So here's some results related to some of the findings. So the figures on your left side, so basically shows the 3 years of data, the trends related to quarter of the year impacts, and as well as the monthly change trend, as well as the hourly trend of the 3 years of crash data. So generally speaking, all 3 years demonstrated a similar pattern related to temporal factors. So we found that generally speaking, the maximum crash occurred during summer, which is the 3rd quarter of a year, and basically followed by second largest count in Q2, which is spring, which is not surprising, right? So spring and summer, basically the major riding season. We also observed that a period with a relatively higher number of bicyclist crashes is between April and August. And in terms of the hourly impact, we observed that between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. has the highest number of crashes compared to others. So higher bicyclist crash counts occurred on weekdays rather than on weekends. So this is also just the observation of the frequency. So that has to do something with the exposure as well. So we also observed like in the south and west regions. So they basically are observed with the highest number of bicyclists and vehicle crashes. Again, this has something to do with exposure as well. So some of the results, as I mentioned, we ran 3 different models on the 3 different sets, because with the assumption that the bicyclist and the vehicle interactions in the travel lane compared to the non-travel lanes, so there will be different behavior, and that's basically will leading to different crash consequences as well as injury consequences. So the results show here, as you can see from the table, the 2 tables, we found that basically by running separate models has provided a much better results when compared to a joint model with all the 4 data sets. So that basically indicating that the behavior at the travel lane will be different from the behavior from the non-travel lanes. So here's some take-home messages and conclusions from the study. Modeling bicyclist injury severities for crashes at travel lanes conveyed a significant contribution of multiple roadway characteristics than the other locations. And we also observed that the vehicle traveling speed, and if the vehicle is going straight, basically they are more likely to result in severe injuries than the other types. And also we found that the bicyclists getting hit by the light or medium trucks at the non-travel lanes locations actually has a higher likelihood of getting severe injuries, which is interesting when compared to the travel lane crashes. So one potential reason for these is basically might be due to the angle of the impact of the vehicle and the bicyclist. So generally speaking, bicyclists hit at crosswalks and at a driveway, which is non-travel lanes, basically their impact points are most likely to be front impact and rear end collisions, while for the collisions that typically occurs at travel lanes is more side impact. So we also observed that bicyclists getting in conflict with vehicles at crosswalks, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and the driveway access points have increased the likelihood of severe injuries for all ages greater than 18, and while only those greater than 55. So one of the potential reasons is that older bicyclists are expected to have higher vulnerability, making conclusions that basically they more willing to, for the riders who are older than 55, they are less willing to basically be speeding as well as making random changes when compared to the younger peers. So for the next step is basically we are also, as I mentioned earlier, at University of Michigan, we are really dedicated to promote the driving safety of our U.S. roadway systems. That includes the vulnerable road user safety. So that's a very huge part of our study focus, as Henry mentioned. So October is the National Pedestrian Safety as well as the Bicyclist Awareness Month. So this is a good opportunity for us to basically share the study with you. So we're still continuing this study. So by leveraging different technologies. So this video I'm going to show is basically one of my students that made using basically by extracting the real driving and the driving and cycling data from our UMTRI data sets that simulate that in the simulation and using software like a color and Carsim. Then we basically put on the 3D, add the 3D version of this. So then we can use the virtual reality headsets for our to increase the reality feel of our participants. So for this case, you basically can rotate the scenario 360 degrees. We can also simulate the same scenario from the driver perspective view, as well as from the rider perspective view. So let me go to, okay. So here's the reference that we have showed in the presentation here today. And last but not least, that I want to thank our sponsors, the Toyota Research Institute, CCAT Center, and MCD for sponsoring our study related to focusing on the vulnerable road user safety. Actually, we'll have 3 papers that will be presented in the TRB in the next January at Washington, D.C. So I hope I will see some of you at Washington, D.C. in next January. So I also want to extend my great appreciation to my collaborators, Fred here and Aditi and Brian and Dave, Henry and Jim, Mark and Scott from the Tree side. And also I want to thank my intelligent and very hardworking students, and Daniel, Yueru, and Tony, and Meitang, Aaron. Thank for their hard work on all those weeks. So basically, I'm just presenting their work on behalf of them. So thank you very much. And so I will hand the floor to Professor Feng, and we'll take the questions in the end. Thank you.
First, I want to thank CCAT for giving us the opportunity to present our research work. So for the second part of this talk, I'm going to present one of our recent study that is called the naturalistic cycling study in the Ann Arbor, Michigan area. First off, I want to say that I'm just like Dr. Shan Bao mentioned, I'm just presenting on behalf of the entire team, my collaborators at Tree, as well as students. So this is really the teamwork. So let's get started. The whole motivation for this research project is really inspired by the idea of the naturalistic driving study, which is already been there for decades. The idea is we put, like Dr. Shan Bao showed in some of the videos, so we put cameras and other sensors in the vehicles and asking people to drive, and the sensors are recording their everyday trips for a prolonged period of time. So the idea is using that to study the driver behavior. So here, inspired by that, we designed this study that is kind of similar, but what we call naturalistic cycling study. So we put the cameras and other sensors on bicycles and record people's everyday cycling behavior. So these slides basically shows one of our earlier work of examining the interaction between drivers and the cyclist, specifically the passing behavior by using the naturalistic driving data. If you're interested, I would encourage you to check out this paper that we published a few years ago. So the objective for this study, the naturalistic cycling study, is to collect continuous, quantitative, and high-resolution data of people riding bikes in their everyday trips on the real-world roadways. So as you can see here, we have cameras, multiple cameras that capturing the riding behavior as well as the road environment. Let me move on to the next slide. So this is one of the research bicycle that we developed thanks to Mark Gilbert and his team at Tree. So as you can see here, we're using this Gen Z e-bike, and there are a total of 4 cameras, one forward-facing camera and one rider-facing camera, and 2 cameras facing the back. So the idea is we are pretty much covering the entire 360 degree of the riding environment. And there's also GPS and other sensors as well. And all the data were recorded on board using this data acquisition system. So on the handlebar, we also implemented something what we call the event marker. So the idea is that we're also trying to collect the data of people's subjective perception of safety. So in our study, we instruct our participants whenever they're riding the bike and if they're feeling unsafe for any reason, they can just press that button to make a mark in the database. So later we can go directly to those button presses to see what actually happened. So that's just another sensor that we included in this study. And this is again shows the camera field of view. So we have one facing the rider, one facing front, two facing the back. And also we have the GPS information that we can overlay on the Google map so we can see the road environment. Sometimes we also use the Google Street Map to verify some of the road features. So everything is synchronized into this software that we developed in-house. So in terms of the data channels, we have 4 channels of videos, 720p at 30 frames per second. And also there's audio. And we also have high resolution, high accuracy GPS signal as well, which later we can use that for creating those kind of heat map, which I'm gonna talk a little bit more in detail in the upcoming slides. And also we have an IMAU or accelerometer that would give us additional information about the rider operation, and also a number of other data channel as well. So when we design this bicycle, the idea is that we want to collect what we call the naturalistic data, or in other words, the bike riding in a natural setting. So we want to give the bike to our participants for weeks. So in this particular study, it's 2 weeks. So we literally we're giving the bikes to those participants. We want to make sure everything is robust and reliable, and it does not require a lot of effort from the users or the participants side in terms of data collection. So the principle that we follow is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So we build this sturdy, robust, and small size and waterproof e-bike, a fleet of 4 e-bikes in 1 small, 2 medium, and 1 large, so that it fits a variety of riders. And also they need to be waterproof because people typically would, if they go to work, they may park the bike outside. So if it rains, we want to make sure everything's working just fine. And also we want to make it super easy for people to use. So they don't really, when they use our bike, they don't need to think about it. All they need to do is to ride a bike. So they don't need to charge the data acquisition system because we directly draw power from the e-bike battery. And also everything is automatic. So whenever the bike is in motion, not going to trigger the acquisition system to start recording. Once the bike was stopped for a minute, then it will go to sleep. So the idea is basically the rider, all they need to care about is to ride a bike. That's our research bike development. And then in terms of data collection, we're really lucky that we finished the data collection just to the riding season before the COVID started. So in 2018 and 2019, we collected data for 2 summers and falls. And the subjects were recruited in the Ann Arbor area because we kind of want to have a concentrated area of riders. And each one would have our bike for a total of 2 weeks. And they were given no specific instructions in terms of where and how they are supposed to ride. We just tell them to use our bike as a substitute of the bicycle that they already using. And at the end of the data collection, we have a total of 77 subjects, and they cover just over 8,000 kilometers or just over 5,000 miles of data or over 300 hours of riding data recorded. So this slide basically shows using the GPS data, we're able to create this kind of heat map to show where actually people are riding. So the brighter the color, it shows more riding data were recorded. For those of you who are familiar with Ann Arbor, this is pretty much the map of Ann Arbor streets. So it pretty much shows people are riding everywhere. So actually for this presentation, I can also show a live version of interactive version of this map where you can see where people are riding. So at this interactive map, actually we can zoom in and out, shows different levels of details. As you can see here, in the middle part is downtown Ann Arbor. And then in the upper right corner, this is basically Tree. So that's where we have a lot riding data recorded just in the Tree parking lot we're testing. And one interesting you can see is that for those of you who are familiar with Ann Arbor, the Packer Road is one of the brightest color here. They have some bike lanes there. It's actually a lot of people using that. Whereas on parallel, there's a Washington Avenue, which is this very light line. So this is a very high vehicle volume road, the Washington Avenue, but you can see there's barely any riding data recorded there, just because there's no bicycle infrastructure there at all. And the roads are very narrow. So we can see this level of details. We can also zoom into a particular local level data. For example, this is one of the more problematic intersection between Fuller and to the hospital. You can see, we can zoom into the local level. You can see where actually people are, whether they're riding on the sidewalk or the side path or on the road, in terms of their preferences. So this very huge, very rich data allow us to examine people's preference in terms of the roadway infrastructures and other things by using this data that we collected over those 2 years. Now let's go back to the my slides. And also we have 4 channels of video data. For example, here we have one video clip of the one screenshot I showed you guys earlier. So this is one of the typical conflicts between a rider and the motorist at the intersection, where the rider was going straight through the intersection, whereas the driver was trying to make a right turn and cut right in front of the rider. So this is typically referred to as a right hook. So I'm gonna play this video. You can see this scenario, and upper left view is a front view of the bicycle. You can see that this car is basically making the right turn and cutting in front of the rider, and the rider actually had to kind of slam on the brake in order not to crash into the car. So this is one of the common conflict type that we observed in this data set. Another one that is slightly less common, but arguably more dangerous is close pass. The rider was passing very closely from approaching vehicle from behind. So this is one example. You can see this car was passing this rider very closely from behind. So we also observed a lot of these cases as well. And we also have data about the riding speed, time of the day, among other information. In terms of the riding speed, most of the riding speed are actually fairly low. About average speed is about 20 kilometers per hour, even though this is an e-bike, and it's actually a type class 1 e-bike, which would only give you assist up until 20 miles per hour. And also it's a pedal assist. It only assists you when you're actively pedaling. So the riding speed is actually lower than what a lot of people are thinking about in terms of the e-bike speed. And in terms of time of the day, we can clearly see the highest point is afternoon rush hour and morning rush hour. So some of our riders actually using the bike for commuting purposes. And also we can see the riding distance. Most are fairly short. So they're just riding through the downtown Ann Arbor. So typically average trip distance is about 5 kilos or 3 miles. So we can see all these summary statistics from our riding data as well. So I mentioned earlier on the handlebar, we implemented this event marker. The idea is we're trying to capture people's subjective rating in terms of the safety as a cyclist. So this is kind of summary of the different scenarios where people were pushing that button. You can see here there are quite some near misses and some close passes. And the most common ones are conflict between the vehicle and the bicycle. So they are the pass crosses between the driver and the cyclist. And the most common ones are the unsafe infrastructure, either the bike lane suddenly ends or the design of the intersection are just not safe for bicyclists. So where the rider actually pressed that button. And also a lot of times the path was obstructed either by a trash can or the parked vehicle. These kind of things are also quite common from our data sets, among other situations. So these data sets basically give us an idea of not only the objective safety in terms of conflicts and crash risk, but also the perceived safety from the rider's directly first perspective. So that's, we believe is also very important in terms of thinking about ways to encouraging more people to using cycling as a viable way of transportation. At the end of the study, we also asked people about their opinions about using our e-bike. So these are just some highlights of some of the comments from our study subjects. So even though Ann Arbor is fairly flat, but people still mention that they appreciate the power assist when they're climbing some steep hills. And also, actually, it helps people to actually compliance with stop signs just because it's easier with the e-bike. It's relatively easier to restart. You don't worry about losing the momentum at the stop sign. And also, no sweat getting to the work, especially on the summer days. And also, often a lot of riders actually comment that it removed the mental block of too much effort of using a traditional, conventional bicycle. And also some other things that we found interesting is sometimes those kind of e-bike also change people's riding behavior in terms of route choices. So this participant mentioned that they stopped looking for the absolute shortest, flattest routes to work, but rather they can, with the assistance of the e-bike, they can actually choose some other roads, maybe lower traffic volume, but actually with the e-bike, it doesn't matter, it's a little bit longer or steeper. So these are just some other comments that we found interesting based on this study. So that is just some of the higher level findings from this study. I want to share with you guys in this meeting. And lastly, I want to acknowledge the sponsor for this project, Toyota Research Institute, and my collaborators from the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. And lastly, if you have any questions about some of the details of this study, feel free to shoot me an email, Fred Feng, my full name, at umich.edu. And I have my research website as well, our group, fenggroup.org. So if you go to the website, you can find some of other research projects that we are doing in our group. So let me see if I can quickly share some of the other work we did. So in our group, we also work on some other studies related to, we developed a virtual reality cycling simulator where people can wear the VR goggles and experience different virtual scenarios. For example, the close pass by a virtual vehicle from the perspective, first person perspective of the cyclists, as well as we did some other study of instrumenting a research bicycle with LiDAR, so we can collect the 3D riding environment in terms of the LiDAR point clouds. So that can be used for studying the interaction between motorists and drivers and the cyclists as well. So if you're interested, please check out our website, fenggroup.org. So that's the end of my part. So I think we have about 10 minutes left for if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to get started with the questions. First question is, thank you for your presentations. In recent years, there's more and more shared e-scooter service. Do you think the takeaways from your studies of cycling can be extended to scootering? Otherwise, what are the different factors?
So maybe Fred, I can take this question. Well, yeah, thank you so much for this question. Actually, I want to introduce one of the work that both Fred and I are working on, and we also have another colleague, Dr. Feng Zhou, working on this specific M-City Taylor project with Honda that we also have other LC members, including Toyota, State Farm, Denso, Ford, that we are working on exactly micro mobility study that contains several parts. So one of the research questions we're trying to ask, what is the crash patterns and evolving factors related to e-scooter involving crashes, and what is the public acceptance towards the micro mobility, specifically e-scooters use, as well as to predict the industry growth in the United States market. So we have found very interesting findings, and we are going to publish those exciting results. Actually, in the M-City November research review meeting, we are going to share some of our findings. So please stay in touch and let me know if you want me to send you the invite or not. But thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you, Shan. What technology did you use for the motion activated recording?
So in terms of the automatic recording of the on the e-bike, so we basically used it's actually not very higher tech. We just used the wheel speed sensor. So there's a magnetic sensor on the rear wheel. So whenever the rear wheel is spinning, so that is records the riding speed. It's not zero. So we use that to trigger our data acquisition system to from sleep to start the recording. And that's an embedded system that the Amtree team helped us to develop.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a same one. Oh no, this is different, sorry. How is the event button integrated into the system?
So that's essentially it's the same idea. We just have a button that is mounted on the handlebar. It's just a regular physical push button. And that is integrated into our embedded system that is mounted on the rear rack of the bike. So it's just keep listening to that button pushes when the system is awake. So whenever push a button, it's gonna just register that into the online data storage, and that's on the higher level. If you're interested in some of the details, I saw that is from Ryan, so feel free to send me an email, and we can share some of the more detailed about the technical details.
All right, this one's a question for me. So, you had some observations on, why the accidents occur, but do you have any observations on why bicycle-related accidents are increasing?
So we observed the fatality numbers are increasing, not necessarily the number of crashes, but first of all, with the pandemic, we already mentioned that there is about 30% of bike use over last year because of the pandemic. More people are more likely to use the bike than before. So that increased exposure, basically base for all the crashes and injury levels. So for the study I just presented, basically we investigated the factors related to the severe injury levels. So not necessarily in terms of the number of crashes, but the general conclusions are pretty consistent in terms of environmental and the bicyclist related factors, as well as the driver related factors.
Yeah, if I can add to that, there are, as Dr. Bao mentioned, there's a series of factors. So sometimes related to the roadway design, intersection design, sometimes related to the driver. So actually in one of our earlier study, I linked in our first slide, that is the study using the naturalistic data. And we found about 8% of the drivers were distracted while they're passing a bicyclist. So from the bicyclist perspective, if you're thinking of riding a bicycle, that's roughly translates to, for every 13 passes, one of the cars passing you was actually not looking at you right before the passing. So that's another emerging factors. Nowadays, a lot of possible distraction sources in the car, and also other things related to the higher speed of the car and the different components of the vehicle is getting bigger and heavier, like larger SUVs and the trucks. So in case there's a collision, the consequence is going to be a lot more severe compared with more lighter or smaller cars.
Okay, thank you. How often did the data show obstructions in bike lanes, and is it a major problem at this time?
I can start that. Maybe Fred, you can add. That's a fantastic question because we have observed, right? So not just the crashes, also generally speaking, the riding season is summer, spring, and fall. So you would understand that it's like in another area, summer is the construction season as well. So in the summer, you can see road construction everywhere. So that is pretty often we can see basically a along with the riders data from the video that we have captured from the previous naturalistic driving study.
Yeah, I will add that it's pretty common for, say, cars parked in a bike lane, or almost every one day, every week, after the trash can collection, or in certain roads in Ann Arbor, there's always those empty trash cans seated inside the bike lane, where oftentimes that create a dangerous situation for rider because they have to merge into the travel lane.
We have a comment on that, and from the audience, that bike lane and sidewalk obstructions are far too common around here. Yeah. Cars, trash cans, overgrown and poorly planned vegetation, rails, etc.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And also I want to add, so that basically I want to add that based on my own observation, I think it is a great news that I see more and more bike lanes that have been added in Ann Arbor road systems as well as across the country. So that is a great news for everybody. So hopefully with all these VRU, vulnerable road user safety awareness of study going on, we will have more and more safety designs for our vulnerable road users.
Okay, so I think I'm going to end with this last question. How can insights from here be applied to interactions between VRUs and autonomous vehicles?
Fred, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So the data that we collected is mainly about the interaction of the cyclist and the human drivers. So we can actually capture a lot of, sometimes there are human to human different ways of communication. For example, a simple example is communicate right of way. So sometimes people may just wave to indicate who goes first. So that typically is a challenging situation for autonomous cars, especially this kind of communication when there are, say, in a more populated area with a lot of pedestrians or cyclists. So it's very hard for, let's say, in a downtown Ann Arbor where there may be 5 cyclists and probably 20 pedestrians at one intersection. It's very hard for to design a self-driving communication way that is make it clear to communicate with each of the other road users outside of that car. So that is typically a lot of challenging situation, but hopefully there are things we can learn from the human-to-human interaction type that were captured from our data.
If I may, I can add to what Fred has mentioned. So basically, the motivation for us to study the vulnerable road user safety, we want to understand what's going on in our current transportation systems, that how we can basically improve those vulnerable road user safety, as well as to project in the future when there is more and more ADAS equipped vehicles, as well as the automated vehicles in the market on the public roads, how we can learn from the interactions between human driver and vulnerable users to project how we should design the future automated vehicles, basically that has the sense of the drivers are comfortable enough to make different maneuvers, the algorithm designed based on the human drivers thresholds, as well as that to make sure the safety of all those vulnerable users.
Okay, there's one more question and that just popped up, but we don't have time today. So Lisa Spellman, we're going to have to send you some comments via email. But that's all the time we have today for the CCAT research review. Thanks to Shan and Fred for presenting this important research to our audience. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, you can explore this and other research led by the University of Michigan on the CCAT website. The link can be found in the chat box. If you missed any part of today's presentation, it will be made available to view at your convenience Monday, November 1st. Please be sure to subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.